Hello, Yu-Gi-Oh players, and welcome to Yu-Gi-Oh! Business Casual. I'm your host, the RJB0. So one of the things I absolutely love about the ARG circuit is they give out the top 16 deck lists ahead of time, so all the people who are watching and all the people who are playing can actually plan for their matches, and we can look at what people are playing while we're watching them, so we can see how their thought process are going about, which makes my job of giving you guys the top breakdowns much easier. And I just really love this event because you always get really interesting stuff. For instance, this Prophecy deck, played by Jarred Randolf in the top 8, he essentially lost to Sixth Sense. Like, Sixth Sense and Return were the two things that killed this deck. So while it didn't get to the top 4, it was a frickin' amazing deck, and I figured I'd like to show it to you guys and talk to you guys about how successful it was. So I'll just run down the deck list really quickly. We've got 2 High Priestess, 3 Justice, 3 Kaiku, 3 Blue Boy. Then you've got 1 Book, 3 MST, 3 Crescent, double Eternity, double Fate, 1 Life, 2 Power, 3 Secrets, double Master, 1 Wisdom, 2 Spellbook Tower, 1 Bottomless, 2 Fiendish Chain, 2 Mirror Force, 1 Warning, 1 Torrential. For the side deck, we have a Breaker, 1 High Priestess, 2 Jowgen, 2 Gozen Match, 2 Iron Wall, 2 Mind Crush, 2 Mystical Ref Panel, 2 Rivalry, 1 Soul Drain. Then the extra deck is 1 Arcanite, 1 Stardust, 1 TG Hyper Librarian, 1 Tempest Magician. Then you've got 1 Abyss Dweller, Phoenix, Gotchi, Cowboy, Herald of Pure Light, Hierophant, Maestroke, Shining Elf, Tempo, and Zenmains. For some reason, the ARG page keeps leaving out 1 extra deck card, as you'll see in a lot of my other breakdowns today. They say they have 15, but they only list 14 of the cards. So a couple of things about this deck. Well, one of the new things we're seeing is Justice. Justice saw a lot of play earlier on when Prophecy had just gotten Spellbook of Judgment, because you could summon the Justice from your deck, banish it, and then get another Spellbook of Judgment to your hand and a Priestess, which a lot of people liked, but it went downhill from there because she didn't see quite as much play, because it just tended to be better to get a Jowgen or a Kaiku from your deck with that Spellbook of Judgment than a Justice. But Justice is actually an extremely good card for this deck. It sets up power. You can also use Fate while it's on the board. It's another card that allows you to put Master on the board. And then once you've used it, you can put a Priestess in your hand and get another Spellbook card from your deck, which is very, very good. So I see him running these over World and Temperance, which seems a lot more consistent. It's a lot faster. And just aids those plays to keep them smooth and consistent. So that was a really, really successful lineup there. Of course, you have to have the 3 Kaiku in a format that's so heavily geared toward Dragon Rulers. 3 Blue Boy are pretty staple. I do like the triple MST. I always talk in these videos about how important it is to have heavy back row removal. In this format, if you can hit the MST at the right time, on the right card, like a Ravine or an Iron Wall or something like that, then you can basically win the game. So the triple MST is really important. Only running 1 Wisdom was something I actually really like, because MST does all the jobs that Wisdom would normally do, and against Dragon Rulers, Wisdom isn't going to do you much good. Of course, you want to have 1 as a backup, because you know your Dragon Ruler players are always going to have Wing Blasts and things of the sort. But it's not something you need to run 2 of, and it's going to get cloggy if you do. The Fiendish Chains and Mirror Forces. Now, this is something I've been talking about a lot recently, which is the art of mirror forcing. Psychological warfare is really important especially in higher tier games in Yu-Gi-Oh!, where you want to make your opponent think you have something and make a play that plays right into your hands from there. And one of the best psychological warfare strategies goes between Fate and Mirror Force, because if your opponent thinks that you've got the Fate face down, they're not going to want to go into one of their extra deck cards, because then they'll hit a minus, and they won't do as well. So what they'll do is they won't go into their extra deck card, they won't go into their Xyz or their Synchro, so they'll just attack with the monsters they have, and you hit them with the Mirror Force, and that punishes them for not making their best play. And even if they did make their best play, you've got that Fate ready for them. So Mirror Force is actually a really important card this format, and I think that people are ignoring it way too much. It isn't necessarily as good in decks like Dragon Rulers, which really don't need it, but in those more control-based decks, those slower decks, Mirror Force is really important this format. As far as side deck choices, there are a couple ones that people were wondering about. The first one is the double Imperial Iron Wall. Imperial Iron Wall has a lot of negative effects on spellbooks. However, the thing about Iron Wall is if you have it, you're against dragons, you're winning the game. Dragon rulers have to work to get rid of that Iron Wall in order to do any damage to you. And in a format where Trap Stun is so popular, what he ended up doing, and we saw this in his top 8 match, was he'd set the Fate with the Iron Wall, even though Fate wouldn't be able to work with it with Iron Wall on the board, and he'd wait for his opponent to Trap Stun, so that his opponent would go off on him even under Iron Wall because he had that Trap Stun, and then he would just hit his monsters with Fate. And the same went for things like, oh, I'm looking for the card, like Priestess. Like, he knew that his opponent was going to be trying to get rid of Iron Wall, and as long as he had Iron Wall and a Kaiku or a Justice or something on the board, he was winning the game, and that was fine. Mystical Ref Panel. This card was huge, and I'm going to talk about this in the next big thing. Mystical Ref Panel has been around for a while, but we've seen in this top 8 just how devastating this card can be. If your opponent Ref Panels you at the right time, you lose the game. The double Jowgen, of course, because it stops special summoning against a dragon deck that doesn't run card troopers and stuff like that. It's really hard to get rid of cards like Jowgen and Fossil Dyna. So using Jowgen at the right time can really be game-ending. And then the third Priestess, just because it's a win condition. Against certain decks, against Dragon Rulers, this card isn't necessarily the best thing to have, but against a deck like Evil Swarms, you're going to want to have as many win conditions available to you as possible. One of the choices that people are going to be noticing about this deck is that he doesn't run Star Hall, which actually makes a lot of sense. Star Hall can be really dead, and if you've got Kaiku against Dragon Rulers, Star Hall isn't even all that important. All you have to do is be able to hit your opponent a few times with that Kaiku, and they're already in a really bad position just by having the Kaiku on the board and losing that many life points. Star Hall really became totally unnecessary to this deck because of the speed and consistency with Justice and Kaiku. Rivalry makes sense. You've got Gozen match. It also makes sense. Rivalry is really good against Evil Swarms. And of course, you can use the Soul Drain and not have any issues. Aside from that, there aren't any really amazing choices to this. The Synchros are a little odd since he doesn't run any tuners. But, you know, he can steal his opponent's tuners somehow, I'm sure. Or just, I don't know, why not? He wasn't going to be using his extra deck a whole lot anyway, except for, like, Shining Elf. He was probably going to pull a few times. Phoenix and maybe Gotchi or Cowboy would have come out, but in all reality, he wasn't going to be using his extra deck all that much. So this is actually a really amazing Spellbook deck. I really loved watching this deck play, and mad props to Jarred Randolf for hitting the top 8 with Spellbooks. I will have some other breakdowns coming your way after the finals, including the final 2 decks, which I'm super pumped for because even though they are Dragon Rulers, they are like spectacularly weird Dragon Rulers, and I absolutely love them, and I'm so looking forward to Williams versus Manigat in the finals. So I hope you guys liked this video. If you did, hit that thumbs up button. If you didn't, let me know why in the comment section below. Discuss this deck. How awesome is it that this Prophecy deck just took a totally different approach than the usual one? Anyway, sorry, I'm gushing about all the cool decks that got into the top this tournament. So thank you guys for watching. If you want to see more discussions, news, analysis, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Shenanigans of all sorts, absolutely hit that subscribe button. Meanwhile, thank you guys for watching Yu-Gi-Oh! And Business Casual. I'm your host, the RJB0, and I gotta jet. See you guys.